everybody, how are you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope that you are super well. Today we're out on the Z8 and the Z7. We're doing a Z8, Z7 comparison. I want to know, seeing as they've both got 45.7 megapixels, their dynamic range is super duper similar. If we look on the charts from DxO or from photosites.com, we can see very, very similar, but some people talk about it being different, some people talk about it being worse. I don't feel that way. What I've seen over my very long journey, please, it's all good, thank you. What I've seen over my very long journey shooting with digital sensors, I suppose it's something like 25 years at this point in time, just shy of 24 years actually. The sensors change, the look of sensors change depending on the sort of technology that's in them. We started with CCD, then we had CMOS, we've had BSI CMOS, and now we have stacked BSI CMOS. So there's been 4 major technological changes in the time that I've been shooting, and they've all just changed a little bit how the image kind of ends up looking. They're just different, and it sometimes takes a little while to get used to each one. Those who've only been shooting, say, for the last 5 to 10 years, well, you've pretty much known just CMOS, BSI, or CMOS, and those sensors were pretty similar. So if you've moved to Z8 or Z9, it might seem like, oh, this is a big deal, but no, this is just change as it continues to change, and that's all good. I'm going to take the shots, I'm going to shoot the video, and I'm going to let you decide. All right, let's do it. Do it, baby.
All right, well, let's take a look at these images. Let's see if we can tell the difference between these files. I don't really have an opinion. I haven't really looked yet. What I've done is select one from each of the shoots. What I did is take something like anywhere between 1 and 5 frames in each location. We used 4 different lenses. We used the 28 2.8, the 50mm 1.2, the 85 1.2, and the 105 macro, just to get a little bit of a range of price points. That's entry, mid, and ultra high. Various locations. And at the end of the day, I'm not trying to prove here if one camera is better or worse. That's not really what I'm interested in. I'm just interested in showing the differences. And at the end, we can decide. The Z8, fantastic. The Z7. Now on the tripod, tried not to move anything, changing cameras and changing lenses. Pretty difficult. Here we are side by side. Which is bigger? Oh, I think they're kind of the same. So maybe we'll go sideways. That might be better for our brains. Z7 on the left, Z8 on the right. We are at 100%, and hopefully focus points are in exactly the same spot. And when I look at this file, I have to say these look pretty similar, and I can kind of see pros and cons between the two. Very, very minor pros and cons. I haven't touched these files. Let's have a look at the adjustments. These ones are both untouched, but there is a difference in color temperature. So what we will do is we will make them the same. So I'm going to copy this from here. And that's interesting. That's just how the cameras see the world. Now, Nikon stated that the Z8 and Z9 will have better white balance capabilities. Very, very similar files. And we are at 100%. We are at 100%. And I really can't see much in it. There might be vague differences in the focal point. I was just getting started. Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that they are so similar. We've got some backlight here. There's clearly some slight differences in how they're handling the color here on the left. And that's really interesting to me. We just don't know how Capture One is also reacting to the Z7 versus the Z8. There are profiles within Capture One that understand these cameras. But honestly, from a resolution perspective, we can see here, looking up at this little tower, they're both looking great. We've got the Z8 on the right. Just to reiterate, just so everybody's really clear, Z7 on the left, Z8 on the right. That's cool. ISO 64, 1250th of a second, f2.8 on the 105 macro. Cool stuff. And of course, the sun is moving and things are changing, so that can have a really minor effect. But yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, even the way these signs look, you know, to me, this sign, maybe the Z8's marginally sharper. I don't know. Honestly, it's at a point where it just doesn't matter. Okay, this is from the same spot. Z7 on the left, Z8 on the right. We are on the 50mm 1.2 at 2.8, ISO 64, 1250th of a second. Let's have a look here, because I lost the sun pretty quickly. It fell behind these clouds. And let's get those color temperatures the same again, like we did before. So we can see here they are different. We will go with the Z8 colors this time. So 55.0. Wow. They're both cool. They're just both cool. I just find that really cool. There are differences, but they're very, very minor. Maybe, I mean, if I look at that image, I kind of can't see anything of any merit that is different. I really can't. Focus is here in the foreground, as we can see. 100% pixel for pixel. These images are deliriously similar. It's almost impossible to pick here side by side. Yeah, I'm really impressed by how we've gone from a BSI sensor, CMOS BSI with the Z7, over to a stacked BSI sensor, CMOS, on the Z8. The sun had pretty much very close to setting. We have Z7 is on the left, Z8 is on the right. Interesting again, the color differences. We will get those color temperatures the same. Quite different how the cameras see the world. Can't always blame the cameras. The light changes as well. This time we will match the Z7. And there we go. We can see they're matching. Now the light was changing. There is a time difference between these shots, and that might be why we're seeing the different exposures. Let's just have a look at that time difference. It's a 10-minute difference, so that absolutely makes sense because that's exactly when the sun is setting. What I will do is I will bring up the Z7 about a stop. It's not even a stop, that's 2/3 of a stop. All right, so we're at ISO 64, 1/125th, 2.8 on the 28mm lens. So this is an entry level lens, and let's see how it is handling things. Let's go in and look at Fed Square here, right in the middle. We are at 100%. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about here with Capture One, is that they have profiles. They have their own profiles. This can affect the files. Now, whether we can actually completely standardize this, let's go to flat, which is what I actually shoot in. So this is what I see when I'm shooting. Oh, hello. Well, there you go. We should have done that from the start. They are so similar. Now, we still can't guarantee the exposure because the lighting was changed. So don't look too much at the brightness. I'm looking here more at kind of the color rendition. And I am really impressed by how Nikon and Capture One are making these files look so similar. Is there a clear advantage or disadvantage in one of these cameras? Just can't see much of a difference. I do think they have slightly different properties. Just slight. It's so slight, and it doesn't matter. Like, if you look at that, you kind of go, there's not a better or worse one here. They're just very vaguely different. And of course, the lighting was slightly different. It was dynamic. I actually think there was a bit of more sun here on the one on the left, and on the right it was still behind the clouds. So the general ambient light is a bit more contrasty with the one on the left. This just continues to say to me that these cameras are extraordinarily, and the idea of the stack sensor hasn't really changed what Nikon are capable of delivering to us as image makers. And honestly, look how similar those files are. And just look at the numbers down the bottom. Next time I do this, I will actually rename them to Z7 and Z8. That would actually be helpful. So I'll change the DSC to Z7 and to Z8. That's just such a great result. I'm really pleased with that.
We had 1/125th, 2.8, f2.8 on the Z8, shooting in 4K, 10-bit, H.265. You can't do H.264 in 4K. On the 28, 2.8. Loving it. Okay, well, I've been out on the Z7 and the Z8 for a while now. Can you tell the difference? Of course, they're different technology. The Z8 is a stacked BSI sensor with a ridiculously fast electronic shutter, whereas the Z7, well, it's more traditional. It's a BSI. It's got a shutter. It's not stacked. It's the sort of sensor that you would see probably pretty much in the D850. Technology keeps moving along, and as I said earlier in this video, these technological changes, like going to a stack sensor and like going to shuttleless, well, it changes things. They just can't keep everything identical. And we do have very slight differences in dynamic range, but they are very slight, like 2%, something like that. And it's only 2% at base ISO. We've looked at this before, but when you get to around 640, I think it is, the Z8 and the Z9 actually have slightly more dynamic range. Interesting conundrum. Love to know what you think. Is there any real, noticeable, tangible, worth worrying about difference? And even if there is a difference is just different. It's not good or bad. Let's keep going. It's cold. It's winter.
We've got Z7 and we've got Z8. Another thing that some of you might have picked up, but I didn't want to point out until the end. And this is how good high efficiency star is. I actually decided to shoot the Z8 on high efficiency star to see if there was any real difference or impact. And so far to me, it doesn't look like it. That codec is looking identical or perceivably identical to the Z7. And the file size difference is quite immense. 34.8 megabytes for this file. And then we do the same thing here. 90 megabytes. So 90 megabytes versus 34. This file is almost 3 times larger. Let's have a close look. Now, all of them were shot this way. So Z7 on the left, Z8 on the right. You can see it here. Z7 on the left. Let's go to our adjustments. Let's get those color temperatures the same. Let's make them both flat. Keep in mind that time has passed. I think it's a little bit darker. Time has passed. Let's just double check that. And we can see that this is 6:04 and this is 6. Yes, I do think that's enough to make that very small difference in the sky because we're seeing the last of the light, the last of the twilight. Very nice. Have a look at the tree, the leaves. All of that's rendering really nicely. And, you know, I don't like or dislike either of them in any differently. The way the lights are behaving, and this is the 50mm 1.2 wide open, is just such an amazing lens, and you can see how it's reacting there. Is it reacting differently on the different cameras? I don't think so. We've got to think about the lights, strobing, and other things that might be going on. There might be a vaguely different reaction between the two cameras. We're at 100%. Have a look at the tree here. I just think these results are very similar. There are minor differences in maybe sharpness, maybe critical focus moved a slight amount. But I'd have to say that, of course, the Z7, my Z7 is 5 years old. I bought it on launch mid-2018. Yeah, I do think our focus points are in slightly different areas because this is getting softer and this is getting sharper. So that's interesting to me, but that's okay. These things happen. Slight differences in sharpness, but slight differences in where the critical focus is. Even so, in both cases, I was aiming for the fork in the tree here. I'm not sure what's happened, but the way the lights are reacting, the way this light here is reacting, of course, it's slightly more out of focus in this one. But these files, what we can see here is that the way that the camera's reacting and the way that the files look overall, which is what I'm interested in, sort of, dynamic range, color, rendering, overall sharpness, all of these things are just so ridiculously similar. There doesn't seem to be any penalty between these two cameras. Now, I can hear people saying, well, what about the D850? Well, you know what? We should do this with the D850, but we know the Z7s are very, very close, negligibly close to the D850, and, well, to be honest, the Z8 is negligibly close to the Z7, and I think this really shows us what's going on here. Remember, the sun had gone down a little bit further on the right. That's why it's darker. But these results are we can see critical focus is different. As I said before, what I'm interested in understanding is just the overall sensor performance. We're not actually talking about sharpness because I don't think there's any difference in sharpness. We're more interested in color, dynamic range, etc. Great result from my perspective. Now I've got the Z7 and the 85 on, and I will show you these images, and will you be able to tell the difference between them? So you might ask the question, why do I shoot this sort of situation as opposed to a test chart? Most of us actually photograph in the real world, whether it's architecture, portraiture, sports, wildlife, street, travel, weddings. It is in environments like this. So this is where I actually want to see how the camera behaves with all sorts of different artificial light, with all sorts of different depth of field, just lots of busyness going on, lights that are uncontrolled. That's what I'm most interested in seeing rather than a test chart. So that's why we're here. That's why it's an uncontrolled environment, and it comes across as messy, but we can see a lot of different things that are going on here. For example, I want to start by looking at this light. Now what I've done here is push this file really hard. If we look over here on the left, shadows are max, highlights are maxed. We've got the Z8 on the right, and I just want to show you that so we are all on the same page. Z8, Z7, Z8 on the right, Z7 on the left. Fantastic, we're all on the same page. Just to reiterate, we are using high efficiency star on the Z8 and the Z7. Those very large uncompressed raw files that are almost 90 megabytes. So we've got 31 megabytes here on the right and just shy of 90 on the left. Pretty amazing results when you consider that is a 3 times differential. It's a lot. Those files are extraordinarily similar. Now, critical focus is probably very slightly different, but we can see here that this coffee machine is pretty similarly in focus, but I do think there is a slight difference there of where critical focus ended up being. But that doesn't really matter. That's just about focus. We're interested in the sensor and what the sensor is doing, and as we can see here, is there a penalty for owning a stacked BSI CMOS sensor that has an electronic shutter? Is there a penalty? Well, in this very busy, crazy situation, I would say the answer is no. Is there a penalty for using high efficiency star? Well, I would say in this circumstance, I can't see it. If you can see it, please do tell me. Now keep in mind, if you think there might be slight differences in contrast between files, let's say you think that one has slightly less contrast. And of course you can adjust it, and it's very simple. So ultimately, my personal conclusion, and I really want to hear what you think, my personal conclusion here is that Nikon has done an absolutely outstanding job of making these sensors look extraordinarily similar. In this particular circumstance, any difference in dynamic range is negligible, and well, personally, it's impossible to see. And honestly, I think in the real world, not in the hypothetical test chart, test bench world where people are measuring dots and numbers on a page, I think in the real world, there is no applicable difference to photographers. And that's it. And if you want to tick a box and say, I have the most dynamic range and I want to use the highest file sizes, then you might buy yourself a Z7, a Z7 II. So here's the thing for me, that 1 to 2% difference that's on paper at base ISO is simply not reading in the real world when we're using it for real use cases. It's just simply not here. It simply doesn't exist for us to be actually able to see and to recognize. And I'm sure we could push this file and print it and blow it up and enlarge it and do all sorts of things, and maybe eventually you might see it. But that's not the real world. That's not real use cases. Outstanding work from my perspective from Nikon to create this new technology which looks extraordinarily similar to the previous technology. I really think absolutely 2 massive thumbs up. This is a massive, massive outcome from my perspective. But more importantly than what I think, you tell me what you think. That's what I want to hear. Z7. So this is the original Z camera that I bought 2018, now 5 years old. Still kicking goals, still going strong. Love it, nothing wrong with it. The only thing I'd like to see change is slightly better video spec. Alrighty, we're just about to do a lens change here. This is our last location for the Z7, Z8 image quality video. Do they look different? It'll be really interesting. Even I don't know. I can't tell at this point whether they're going to look different. But there are some observations that come from shooting these 2 cameras side by side. Like, for example, how well they both focus in the dark or not. All right, everything's the same. So we'll just roll some video on that. Now, they're both set to 4K, but the Z8/Z9 only does 4K in H.265, whereas on this, it's H.264. Well, there it is, the Z7 and the Z8, both 45.7 megapixel cameras. Both can shoot video, both can do 4K video, both can do 7, 8, I think even 9 frames per second. But obviously one can do a lot more. It can do 8K and 20 frames per second. But if your use case is Z7 or below, it's spec, and let's face it, you're a landscape photographer, portrait photographer, still life photographer, even wildlife that doesn't move quickly photographer, can you just get away with a Z7? Are the files that different? I can't wait to hear in the comments below what you think of these 2 cameras. The Z7 was a great 45.7 megapixel camera when it came out, and now we have so many to choose from in the Nikon range. Z7, Z7 II, Z8 and Z9. I really don't think there'll be any more. I hope not anytime soon anyway. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Is your Z7 enough? Or do you need a Z8 or a Z9? It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I'd love to see you again. So please do subscribe, please share, and please like. See ya.